it was just so badly done. I think that they tried to capitalize on it. Yes. But if that was their aim, if their aim was to, attack their own country, so then they could go and attack Iraq, well, why didn't they just, make the people in the plains a bunch of Iraqis? Why make them a splinter group living out of living out of an allied country's offskirts in Pakistan, the Pashtun areas.
I guess just on that, for a lot of Americans, no disrespect, but perhaps they may not be as discerning to identify the difference between an Iraqi and an Afghani and a Saudi Arabian. Do you think that's a fair statement?
No, I really don't, because there are certainly large swathes of the American population, and to be fair, large swathes of the Australian population who couldn't put any of these places on the map, and they'd see them all as just bloody towelheads. But I don't think that that's an excuse for the the Defence Department to be. They're going to go to the trouble of planning a massive conspiracy in which they get guys to hijack planes and bring down symbols of American capitalism and militarism. As a pretext for attacking Iraq, then why not make them from Iraq?
Yeah, no, you make a fair point. And of course, that logic that I mentioned before, obviously, as you said, does not necessarily prove a link between the government and a conspiracy with regard to 9/11. But I guess it certainly allows people to at least frame the government with a motive, I guess, to engage in such a conspiracy. It gives them that kind of ammunition, I guess. Do you think the Bush administration and the 9/11 Commission has done enough to convince the American people and indeed, I guess, the international population that it did have no hand in 9/11? I mean, for instance, the latency in being able to produce solid reports and I guess the lack of vision from the Pentagon in regards to, cameras being evacuated there and no actual footage of planes, etc.
Yeah, no, I think they have, actually. I mean, if you read a lot of the stuff in the 9/11 Commission, it deals pretty heavily just with the problems of coordination with the US intelligence agencies. There were 9... Yeah, I'm pretty sure I remember correctly. There were 9 US intelligence agencies at the time of the 9/11 attacks. There are now 16.
Is that a good thing?
I don't really think it is. I mean, this is something that's heavily... a lot of these new agencies are effectively just, help them spy on their own population, but also, foreign intelligence and all the rest of it. But they split them up. There's several different forms of intelligence,
That almost sounds as though they've made it more complicated.
Yeah, well, this is the problem. The irony is that the 9/11 Commission identified incoherence and, a lack of strategic direction as major issues with the US intelligence infrastructure. You had the Secretary of State, which was Donald Rumsfeld, and the Director of Central Intelligence, who I can't remember who it was at the time anymore, but they both had equal sway in terms of directing the movements of the National Intelligence Services, foreign and domestic, and trying to put their intelligence in wider context, and also in terms of trying to at least identify what was important and what wasn't. And you had a very clear agenda with Rumsfeld. He was the more sort of egotistical, and bellicose sort of character, and he was pushing his own agenda at the time. And so what happened was they were looking at Iraq for a long time. If I remember right, he was focusing heavily on stuff out of that area. Mm. And as a result, again, I'm a bit rusty on this, but a lot of intelligence about the hijackers and all of the things that just looked a bit suspicious, at the time, like these guys, taking flying lessons but not bothering to learn to land. All that stuff went through US intelligence agencies, and it all got flagged. But then it was kind of like, oh, that's not a worry. We're focusing on other things right now. Throughout the 90s as well, you have to remember that the Clinton administration actually did. It was one of the first administrations to cut a bit of spending in defence. So you might, this is not. I don't really want to make an argument for giving the US more, reason to spend on defence, but their intelligence staff has always been pretty overstretched because they have such a massive global footprint, and
perhaps that needs to be reduced.
Oh, absolutely, it does. It's unsustainable, and that's a whole other subject of conversation.
We'll get into that another time. Yeah, it sounds like at some level there's a bit of a dysfunctionality with their US intelligence departments. But anyway, look, we could, as you said, digress into that a lot more, I'm sure. But I guess getting back, I guess I mentioned earlier that the Truth Movement has many celebrity endorsers. I just want to play you a quick sample here.
Yeah. It said it fell at, NIST report said it fell at free fall.
So then you make the
wait a minute. That means you got to defy the laws of physics. That means everything was removed in which for anything to fall at free fall.
But then you make that
speed.
leap then to the idea that it was demolished by explosives inside by the government.
I don't make a leap. Why didn't they check for explosives? They never did, if not to eliminate them. They didn't do that.
Tower 7 disturbs me the most. I look at towers 1 and 2 and I go, well, they got hit by planes, you know, and look at the fire and everything. Maybe it broke. Maybe everyone's being crazy. But that Tower 7 just went whoosh, just like a controlled demolition. And everybody's like, yeah, but it had holes in the building. And you see the hole in the building? Yes, I see the hole in the building. But wouldn't it fall towards that hole? Why is it falling like that?
That it defies physics for the World Trade Center Tower 7, Building 7, which collapsed in on itself. It is impossible for a building to fall the way it fell without explosives being involved. World Trade Center 7. World Trader 1 and 2 got hit by planes. 7, miraculously, the first time in history, steel was melted by fire. It is physically impossible.
And who do you think is responsible for that?
I have no idea. But to say that we don't know that it imploded and it was an implosion and a demolition is beyond ignorant. Look at the films, get a physics expert here from Yale, from Harvard, pick the school. It defies reason.
Let's get one. Let's get one.
The way Tower 7 fell, it just kinked in the middle and fell down free fall speed. Almost. I mean, everybody, like, they'll nitpick at you. Oh, it was 1/10 of a second slower than free fall.
No. NIST has had to go back now and admitted, okay, there was free fall in the first 10 floors.
Well, even if it was just close to free fall, that's crazy. There was no resistance. It just gave up. Why wouldn't it, like, wiggle and collapse towards where it got jacked? It just seems like a controlled demolition.
Yeah, and then you've got Silverstein, the leaseholder, the owner of 7 as well as the rest of the complex, right? On tape, on the record, saying, we've had such a terrible loss of life that day, and I made the decision that they should go ahead and pull it.
And we gave the order and watched the building come down.
Yeah. The pull is that's his coming to the demo world as action and cut to the movie world.
Here is Larry Silverstein, the owner, who took out $7 billion of insurance on the 2 towers, and he's also now bought the Sears Tower and taken out a bunch of insurance. And Governor Pataki just called him the lowest of the low in the newspaper because he's holding out for $1 billion more now. Interesting fellow, made out quite well, and here is his statement from America Rebuilds.
I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. And I said, you know, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
Okay, Dan, that was just a bit of a sample for you there. Obviously, that footage was taken before Charlie Sheen's brain imploded. I guess now that we're not dealing here with trained scientists or engineers, obviously by any stretch of the imagination. But there are some compelling points made there, I think, for at least a lot of people to tap into. I think, namely, people tend to, I guess, base their argument for an inside job around World Trade Center 7. Obviously, it collapsed in a similar fashion to the Twin Towers, despite no plane impacts. And also, I guess, Larry Silverstein's comments there, obviously a shareholder in the Twin Towers, who is on the record as saying the authorities opted to pull the building. That's a term that he later claimed to mean evacuate, although, you know, obviously there is a strong link between the demolition world and the word pull. And I think a lot of people initially would assume that he's referring to, you know, blowing it up. Well, I guess, what are your thoughts on Building 7? And is this just the Truth Movement overreaching, or is there any merit in it?
Yeah, I remember looking at Building 7, that whole thing a while ago. I don't remember. It's been such a long time. You know, it's 10 years ago now. It is quite peculiar that it just falls straight down like that. You know, I mean, but I wonder if maybe that was just done like that on purpose, and you know, the government is just anxious not to talk about it because it gives too much life to the Truth Movement. You know, there could have been opportunism and all the rest of it. It's a bit of a difficult thing for me to comment on because it's been a while since I've read about it. And you know, when you show, as you said, you show a bunch of celebrities talking about science. It's a little bit like it's a little bit like when you get a whole bunch of right wing pundits, like Alan Jones and all that, talking about why